Hey everybody, Mike Naso here from podweather.com, an internet partnership radio with a late evening update on the tropics. A lot to talk about this week. It's going to be a long week if you're tracking the tropical Atlantic. And if you're in the Caribbean and even out towards the Gulf of Mexico and the East Coast even, you should be tracking what we have out there. You can see Bertha still out there. Tried to become a hurricane today, but it continues to buffet Jamaica. Not Jamaica. Jamaica's down here. It's not buffeting Jamaica at all. It's buffeting Bermuda and pulling on off towards the northeast now. And it's going to be slow and erratic, but it will eventually pull on out. You can see in the central Atlantic, that wave we were watching yesterday has really not shown any organization convection-wise, but it has a very decent circulation spin with it. And once that convection refires, if it does, it's very likely the National Hurricane Center will upgrade it to a depression. This is moving generally towards the Caribbean Sea and the Lesser and even Greater Antilles. Behind it, you can see another wave we're watching moving off Africa, and even a little low pressure in the Gulf we'll touch on. But first, let's go to Bertha, as we have for, I'm thinking now, 10, 11 days. As of 8 p.m. Eastern Time, it was at 33.4 north, 64.0 west. Maximum sustained winds were up now to 70 miles an hour, so it's very close to becoming a hurricane again. Gusting to 85. It's moving now north at 10. It's cleared Bermuda, but Bermuda, those watches and warnings were warranted. You had winds pretty gusty into the strong tropical storm force, 995 millibars, and it's expected to become a hurricane and then slowly drag eastward, and then eventually by the end of the week and the weekend start to pull out to the northeast faster, but not before kind of wiggling southward here. But it could really be further to the east and straight out, or further to the north and straight out. It's kind of a technicality. The point is Bertha's going to be heading out, and for people who have been tired of Bertha, that's good news. You can see there on the satellite as the sun went down, you can see Bermuda. You were in a cloud shield here for quite a long time, and you got buffeted pretty bad. There's the circulation center trying to organize back into a hurricane, but at the end there you can see it opens up a bit more on the north side, so I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but it is possible. Regardless to whether or not it becomes a hurricane, it is generally moving away, and that's very good news. You can see the models are in agreement as well for some kind of dippity-dop here before heading on out. How many times you get to use that word, honestly? But a little dippity-dop here before it moves into the North Atlantic and weakens. Now here in the Central Atlantic we have what would just appear to be a little bit of a nothing out here, but it's actually a pretty well-defined low pressure moving west. But if you look at the IR, note that we don't have any deep convection around it. The spin is much better than 24 hours ago, but the convection is lacking as it pulls away from the intertropical convergence zone, and this is all moving towards the west. And if we actually take a look at the satellite loop of the visible as it goes down, you can see right in there at the end there, that spin in there, a little bit of popcorn thunderstorms. There is a spin in here that is very pronounced, probably right around 12 north and say 44.5 west, somewhere in there, and is jettisoning on off, not too fast, but at a decent pace towards the west-northwest in this general direction north of west. Now, a few things to note about this. First of all, the models are in agreement that it's going to go further south than they had been showing the last 24, 48 hours. They were showing up here. Some were showing it getting pulled in the wake of Bertha. With Bertha further to the north and likely to be weakening and heading on out, we should see this continue westward, especially given that it's not developing quickly. So if it maintains its current motion, it's probably going to move through the Lesser Antilles in about, say, 2-3 days, and then into the Caribbean Sea by 4 and 5 days. And you can see a few models in here. The GFDL has it approaching northern Central America. The Hworth model has it getting caught up over Hispaniola, heading towards Cuba. The BAMs are in here in the middle. And it's complicated to say exactly where it's going to go because the GFS has been having trouble keeping it now. There's less model development with it based on the GFS, but we do have the entity to continue to watch as it moves west, and you're going to want to keep a watch on it if you're in the Caribbean, and even up towards, say, the Florida Keys and North Gulf Coast. They want to keep an eye on this one. Now, wind shear currently is very favorable over the top of it in this region here, but there is a stretch of wind shear in here, 30 to 40 knots, On the south end of this favorability over the Bahamas, if we take a look at the shear tendency, you can see that better, see how favorable the pattern is. But then in the Caribbean, you have the winds moving directly towards the east where our system's coming from. But in the short term, shear shouldn't be a problem, neither should water temperatures. It's all a matter of blowing up some thunderstorms and keeping them. By the time the system gets into the Caribbean, it's kind of hard to tell what the environment should be like. This shear should be decreasing as this system generally moves on westward, and we get more of a ridging type of pattern over the Caribbean. That's what some of the models were pointing at the last 24 hours. So if this system does develop, it can certainly be a tropical storm moving through the islands, and maybe even a hurricane by the time it gets in towards the central to western Caribbean. So this one needs to be watched. Again, looking at the water vapor, a lot of dry air is having to contend with this. Might be why it's having trouble firing good thunderstorms. I mean, if we had a big blow-up of convection right over the top of this thing, it would be instantly upgraded to a tropical depression. The Hurricane Center is watching it extremely closely, and we could count that these guys will keep us informed. Behind Invest 94L, we do have a decent wave out here, and another one moving off Africa. And again, we're still about 2 months away from the climatological peak of hurricane season. So if this is going to be our third named storm, which by the way would be named Cristobal, then we're really going to have to not let our guard down. We'll wait and see what the August forecast says from Dr. Gray and Dr. Phil Klotzbach. Now in the eastern Pacific south of Central America here, we've had this disturbed weather that's really had trouble getting going. It looked great. It was starting to spin automatically. We thought, uh-oh, this thing's going to become a hurricane. Well, some of the models still think it might as it moves west, but it needs to get better organized. It continues to move in that direction. And then as we look further out, you could say, well, what's this? This looks like a hurricane. Yeah, you're correct. This Hurricane Aleta, as of 5 p.m., it was at 15.8 north, 109.7 west. Winds were up to 85 miles an hour, gusting to 105. It's moving straight west at 10, a little bit more of a west-northwest, then back to the west tracks expected, 981 millibars. And as we look at Hurricane Aleta at this hour, that track could be anywhere within this cone, but generally towards the west is what we're looking at. You can see the hurricane here. We saw that eye pop out earlier, and then a burst of convection covered it. That's an indication of a hurricane. That's right around, say, 85, 90, 100 miles an hour. So a potent little hurricane out there, but thankfully moving away from land. Finally, as we look into the western Pacific, we do have a new depression out here. It's forecast to become a tropical storm and move generally towards China the next 24, 48, 72 hours. Keep an eye on that, especially if you're in China and even the northern Philippines. I'm Mike Naso from podweather.com. Stay tuned. We'll have more on the tropics in the upcoming week.